of something truly spectacular. This company keeps building more and more momentum. And whether I care to admit it or not, there are a handful of young men who have been here since the beginning that will keep pushing this company forward for the next couple of decades. 4 men to be exact, 4 pillars.
This is GKW, Good Karma Wrestling. Welcome back in. I'm Gabe Neitzel along with Jonathan Hood from ESPN 1000 in Chicago, Brian Rowitz from ESPN West Palm. Of course, I do most of my work at ESPN Milwaukee. But where we wanted to start the show today, because there are so many things going on in the world of wrestling, it kind of resets a little bit in the WWE after WrestleMania. But AEW, lots of things that they continue to build towards, maybe with some of their partners in New Japan Pro Wrestling as they have their first show in Chicago coming up this weekend. I know Jay Hood's going to be there. Very excited to talk about that. So we decided that we would start today's show with taking that concept that MJF was talking about in that famous promo, the 4 pillars of AEW, but we're going to turn it into the 4 pillars of professional wrestling overall. So the 4 people that we believe right now are holding up professional wrestling. Thought it could be a fun topic of the 4 best wrestlers going on right now. Jay Hood, who do you have at the top of your list?
Okay, the 4 pillars of professional wrestling in 2022. Well, you know, there are some wrestlers that are over and some that are not. Over the years, you could say The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin or Triple H or Ric Flair and the Horsemen. There's so many that have been pillars in the business for a long time. The number 1 pillar, and someone we did see wrestle at WrestleMania in 2022, is Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is one of the pillars because he is a wrestler and is a promoter, and he's one of the pillars.
He's a wrestler. He's a wrestler.
He's a wrestler. He's on the roster. Did you see WWE.com? Did you watch WWE.com?
Wait,
I saw it. He's in there.
Did they put him
Mr.
in the
McMahon.
active? Is he on the active page right now after getting a big win over Pat McAfee at Mania?
That's right. That's right. So Mr. McMahon, so Vince McMahon has to be part of those 4 pillars, followed by whoever has the WWE Championship, guys. And I guess right now it's Roman Reigns. Who's hotter in wrestling right now than Roman Reigns? Who's hotter than him at this point in time? He goes into WrestleMania and he's able to beat Brock Lesnar. He's had such a long title reign. I mean, he's making like Bruno Sammartino and wrestlers of that ilk blush at this point in time with the Backlund run, the Hulk Hogan run. This has been a long time for Roman Reigns to be champion. So he's one of the pillars of the business. And then from there, you've got to give it to independent wrestling around the world. There wouldn't be, if there wasn't 4 independent wrestling guys, we wouldn't see some of these guys in the WWE and AEW and New Japan. So independent wrestling all around the world, I think, is one of the pillars that hold up the business today. And you got to give also credit to Tony Khan. Tony Khan also is one of the pillars because he's not only owning AEW, but also ROH. Now, maybe that's not as big a leg on the table as Vince McMahon, but he definitely is one of the pillars holding up the business today in 2022.
All right, so I think I agree with 1 and maybe half of yours. I put Roman in there also. I think.
Yeah, I mean Roman. Yes, Roman's going to be, I think, on everybody's list.
Yes, like you are the face of the WWE. You're the face of the franchise that gets the most views every single week. Obviously, numbers are down and they are what they are, but they are the most recognizable brand in sports entertainment, in wrestling, whatever you want to call them. So I think Roman definitely. The others I'm going to go with. So to your indie wrestling one, I sort of agree, but to me, representing them, I'm counting them as 1, but the Bucks. I think what they've done, like they are responsible for why we have AEW right now. I think they're a big reason as to why people sort of felt that connection to indie wrestling because of BTE, because of that access. So I think they're a big reason why. Sort of along those lines, I put Becky Lynch also as sort of the face of women's wrestling. I think she's a big reason as to why we got here. I think she's starting to branch out a little bit, and we see her here and there, and that's why I put her there. And then the 4th one, I'm going with Chris Jericho because I think AEW being successful is the best thing possible for pro wrestling. And the way you get that audience to grow, and they seem to be stuck right now just under 1 million, is a guy like Chris Jericho. He's someone that if you tune into TBS or TNT, you're going to recognize him and be like, oh, this is Chris Jericho. I've seen him before. Let me try and watch this now. Whereas some of the other guys might not carry the same power. So that's why I put Jericho as the 4th guy.
I mean, if you watched him 6 months ago, you might not recognize him. Shout out to that weight loss, man. He looks fantastic.
He
but
does.
I mean, to Jericho, I mean, he is the master of reinventing himself. Just making those subtle changes. I mean, how many times has he reinvented himself in AEW already? From Le Champion and the bubbly stuff, and then he does the musical show number with MJF, and kind of making now another heel turn after he had one faction kind of go with a face turn. Now with the Jericho Appreciation Society, he's back to a heel. He makes more turns than Big Show, but he makes it more. They make more sense within the storyline.
He reinvents himself, I think, is the biggest thing. Like, it's not just the turn; it's that he's reinventing and having different characters every time.
Yes, 100%. Because even though he's still coming out to Judas every week, you don't see, Le Champion. You don't see any of the other stuff that identified him pre-Jericho Appreciation Society other than the music. So I've got Roman on my list, obviously, as well, because he is, to me, the top thing in pro wrestling. You can't be champ for that long. You can't hold both belts in the WWE without being that guy. And the impressive thing here to me is pre-pandemic, so just a little over 2 years ago, did you actually, if we did this list, despite WWE wanting Roman to be on this list, I don't think he would have been. So the fact that everybody fought Roman Reigns as the guy in wrestling for so long, and now he is over and everybody just loves this head of the table character. They buy into it. It's fantastic. For me, I'm surprised that we actually got here. And kudos to them because they knew they had something. It just took them a while to find that right recipe.
Well, I think that's part of the frustration with WWE. Like, we get frustrated with their storytelling, but they told that story. They got Roman to this point, but it's now just being able to do other things. Like, being able to focus on more than one toy at a time is the issue with WWE, because this shows they know what they're doing from time to time. They made Roman into the star, but why can't we see it anywhere else?
Well, ultimately, guys, it comes from trust, right? Who else has the autonomy besides Brock and Paul Heyman and maybe a little Randy Orton here and there to be able to be themselves? Here's bullet points of what you're going to say, but they can say it in their own voice. More times than not, 97% of the wrestlers we see in WWE are not speaking in their own voice. And that's because they are not allowed to be able to say what they want to say. I mean, this is the best Roman we've ever seen because Roman, this is close to his personality. And I love that. I wish more WWE wrestlers had that kind of autonomy.
Well, that's what you always heard. I mean, at least from the Attitude Era guys, hey, your character that goes out there, it's you just kind of turned up to 11. You turn it up a little bit and you accentuate some things to make it more showbiz. But to your point there, Jay Hood, it's not a coincidence that along for this entire ride for Roman Reigns has been Paul Heyman. I don't think that's a coincidence that we've seen the best Roman Reigns, which is why also I think we're kind of apprehensive and more hopeful about Cody Rhodes because it seems like he has a little bit of that freedom, at least to start. But we'll see how that continues. I agreed with you in terms of Brian, in terms of like the face of women's wrestling, Becky Lynch. I had her on my list as well, just because, again, I mean, she was gone for, the almost a year,
Right.
because she got pregnant, but she comes back immediately, gets the giant pop at SummerSlam, goes over. Everybody's upset, but then she's able to turn it into something that, okay, we boo you out of respect. Like we accept this heel character, but I think that the crowd is still pretty much behind her. I also agreed
on that note, real fast, I think she deserves credit for being one of the people that got over outside of storytelling. Like, she got over organically after her nose broke. And instead of it being used against her, which we see so often in WWE, it turned into a positive and she was able to go on this run. I think that deserves credit.
I will give the WWE credit because when Becky Lynch came back, she wins the championship in 30 seconds or less against Bianca Belair in Las Vegas. She goes to the first Raw and she wants to be a heel, but people weren't turning with her. It's like, it's Becky Lynch. Who boos a woman who just had a baby, right? I mean, you just had a baby. Boo. Like that. Well, and she tried it, right? So it took about 3 weeks to a month for people to understand, like, oh, she's really into herself. I was not for the heel turn or at least the change of personality, but it really worked out well for her because it elevated her even more. It was Vince's vision to turn her heel. I didn't like it, but you know what? It's worked out well for Becky Lynch because she gets even more respect now.
Well, that's what happened, to kind of go along with Brian when she first got over, when, she busted the nose, part of the invasion angle, or, right before a Survivor Series. All a part of that storyline as well was, she was tagging with Charlotte Flair. And then, like Charlotte stealing all the spotlight. And like everybody was behind Becky Lynch when she turned on Charlotte Flair, even though she was supposed to be the heel. Like everyone's like, no, this is supposed to be Becky's moment. Why are we inserting Charlotte here? Everybody was still behind Becky. I do have the Young Bucks on there as well because I felt that tag team wrestling needed to be represented in these pillars, because I think what AEW and what the independents do incredibly well, to your point as well, Jay Hood, is tag team wrestling. It can be an afterthought at times with the WWE, where they just kind of hodgepodge it and throw some, a couple of wrestlers together. Sometimes it accidentally works out. Like I would say RK Bro has been pretty entertaining over the last few months. And sometimes it works out. And a lot of times when they decide to do New Day and Usos, even though we've seen it 6,000 times, it's still going to be a really good match. So I'm going to sign up for it, much like anytime we get the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers. Like those have been two of my favorite matches, Young Bucks and Lucha Brothers, when they've done them at All Out in Chicago. Like they have been some of my favorite matches, the steel cage match this last year, and they put on a hell of a show against FTR this last week. So I think the Young Bucks, what they do, again, what they mean to AEW, what they mean to tag team wrestling, they're on my list. And then I kind of struggled with my last one. I thought about putting MJF. I thought about Jericho, but ultimately I landed at Jon Moxley, because I think that the BCC doesn't work without Jon Moxley. I think he's one of the most over wrestlers in AEW. People really get into it whenever he shows up. And he just, again, I feel that people buy into what he's doing because he's made it so real and has gone from goofy guy getting a shot in his ass in WWE to legitimate ass kicker in AEW. He's been the AEW world champ, and anytime he's involved with something, it feels that much more important on AEW.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Becky Lynch. Why isn't it Charlotte?
I mean, so again, in terms of that's a great question, because I also thought about women's wrestling. You think of Becky, I think you think of Charlotte. I just buy into Becky more. I think the crowd is more behind her. The Charlotte thing, she kind of grows stale from time to time. And maybe Becky is benefiting here from being gone for those 10, 11, 12 months while she was off having a baby. So then she was able to kind of reinvent herself and be so fresh for the last 6, 7 months. But I just kind of lean towards Becky because I feel that the stories she ends up telling end up being a lot more compelling than the stories that are involving Charlotte Flair.
And I think also the fact, like, just from a mainstream standpoint, I feel like we don't see Charlotte at stuff. Like, we see Becky, we see Sasha, I guess Bailey a little bit. But, like, I feel like those two, like, if anything, if not Becky, I would probably go more towards Sasha. Like, some of the shine she's gotten the last few months, storyline-wise, she's not at the top right now. But, being at the start of the national championship, being in the Mandalorian, like, she's all over the place also and representing from a different area.
Well, I think that we all agree we just went in a different route, right? Because when I say independent wrestling, if it wasn't for independent wrestling, we probably wouldn't have AEW because it all stems from the Young Bucks. They had to be the first ones to buy in, and then Jericho, and then Cody. It's funny. One of our comments on here says, what about Cody? I think that's an emerging pillar. I mean, he definitely was in AEW for a while, but now we'll see what happens in the WWE. Can he be one of the pillars? Because I tell you one thing, guys, as we've been seeing on Raw, I mean, he gets his AEW music, his AEW, his entrance. He gets more pyro than JBL ever had when he was champion. So, I mean, or more than Batista. It's amazing, right? So I think that he's an emerging pillar for sure in wrestling based on what we've seen so far in 2022.
We're all shocked that he still gets the entrance, right? Pro wrestling has more than one. Like the fact that he says professional wrestling in the open, like Vince is somehow letting this go. It's unbelievable. Hey, I love it. I just, and part of it with Cody is it's all about trust. You said it before, Jay Hood. It's all about trust. And I want to trust that they're going to tell some great stories with Cody, but they're at a point where I have to see it to believe it at this point. Outside of Roman Reigns, outside of Brock Lesnar, like those are the only two in the last 2 years who have consistently been able to kind of do their thing. And if you let Cody do his thing within the WWE, because again, Seth Rollins, like at one point, Seth Rollins would have been on this list. And I would argue Seth Rollins should be on this list. But he's not, because of the way that WWE has kind of used him over the last couple of years. I thought that they had a really good chance and a really good story to tell potentially with him, the way he defeated, by disqualification Roman Reigns before WrestleMania, and that seems to have fallen by the wayside. So I hope that Cody gets there, because that means WWE is telling a really good story. But right now, I can't trust that.
I agree with that. And the other thing with Cody, I think Monday worked so well, him and the Miz segment, the match was whatever, but the promo where he's mentioning those, those words you're not supposed to mention in Vince's world, calling himself a pro wrestler, calling it a belt, and Miz sort of playing the sports entertainer, I think worked. The worry now with Cody, the numbers mean so much. That Raw After Mania, they finally topped 2 mil, first time in a while. They went back under 2 mil this week. So, I worry if it continues down that road, does Cody still get this freedom, or does he become the scapegoat all of a sudden?
The numbers mean something only so far, right? Because in the last 4 or 5 years, the top rated Raw was when they did the 2-hour gauntlet match with Seth Rollins. It was one of the top rated things. Oh, shocking! Professional wrestling fans like professional wrestling, and we haven't. We'll get into it here a little bit. But I was at SmackDown on Friday. We had 4 matches in 2 hours.
Well, that's what happens when SmackDown comes to a B-town, Nigel.
Oh, boy. Jay Hood looking for that Milwaukee heat. He wants that Milwaukee heat.
When you come to a B-town, pal, you get 4 matches. Chicago, you would have had 8. Hey, man, sorry.
Man, I was looking forward to you coming up for the AEW show in June, but okay, you know what? Fine. Hey, if that's the way it's going to be, we'll have to sit on separate sides of the arena when they come up here.
I'm coming up there in June. I am coming up there. Please let me in. Please let me in the Panther Arena. Please let me in. Nigel will have the door locked. It's unbelievable. Let me in.
I'll know people, Jay Hood. I'll keep you out. Let's go ahead and get to what we like to call our 3 count. What do we have at number 1, Brian?
Well, we'll start with that SmackDown. The night ended on Friday with Nakamura interrupting Roman Reigns. Is main event knock the right next move with the Universal title?
They clearly don't know what the next right move is, right? If Shinsuke Nakamura was coming out. So again, I was there for SmackDown because it was in Milwaukee at Fiserv Forum. And I was actually surprised, because the last time the WWE came around, and maybe it had something to do with being, I think it was December, 22nd, 23rd, something like that. It was just a few days before Christmas, that Christmas week. It was very poorly attended. They pretty much jammed everybody over to the camera side to make it look a little more full. But this time it was legitimately full. Fiserv Forum was as full as it's been for a WWE show, but it really didn't deliver. It was okay. Ronda Rousey came out. Her promo, she was kind of tough to hear initially on the mic, so they had some sound issues. They eventually got that figured out. But we had 4 matches. We had the premiere of Gunther. He had a squash match. We had a roll-up, which it was kind of a fun match. Xavier beat Butch, and then Butch got a little feisty after. The best match of the night was when Liv beat Sasha. The crowd absolutely ate that up. The fact that Liv came in, beat Sasha, that was fun. And then we got Sami Zayn versus Drew McIntyre, which wasn't much of anything. So a lot of promos, a lot of recaps other than that. And then Shinsuke Nakamura comes out at the end. If they let Shinsuke actually be a contender, I'm okay with it. But I can't trust them with Shinsuke after he won the Royal Rumble. We all got excited for Shin versus AJ, and that's probably one of the more disappointing WrestleMania matches I can remember because of how excited we are. We pointed it out. We talked about it last week on WrestleMania. Going in, we could probably point to there are only a handful of matches that we were probably really excited for. Some of them over-delivered. But for the most part, the ones that we thought were going to be good ended up being pretty good. That one was just so disappointing with Shinsuke versus AJ. So the crowd was excited that Shinsuke came out. But to me, it was they looked around okay, someone's got a Shinsuke. All right, come on down. And I just, it doesn't seem like a great idea, because they haven't booked Shinsuke Nakamura outside of being a comedy act for, year and a half at this point?
Yeah, at least.
Well, I mean, am I supposed to believe that Shinsuke Nakamura could beat Roman Reigns when Brock Lesnar couldn't beat Roman Reigns? I mean, it's just sometimes it's just common sense, right? and it's common sense booking. If you knew 3 to 5 months ahead of time, like, hey, Brock's going to lose and Shinsuke's next, don't you got to get Shinsuke hot? I mean, it's very simple, right? It's like, if he's really a contender, don't you put the IC championship on him, a U.S. championship, whatever championship, or put him on a heater where he wins championships?
In fairness, the IC was on him a few months ago.
Right.
And I think he defended it like, what, twice?
Yes.
I think it was like 2 defenses in 4 months. So I guess technically.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? I mean, so he did. Here he comes. He stands up there in pretty much a comedy act with Rick Boogs. Boogs is out, so like you just said, it's just like pin the nail on Shinsuke and just kind of just try to find a contender. Yes, you. Okay, so am I supposed to pay money for that? See, that's why the WWE doesn't care, right? It's like, if you really cared about the booking, you'd find someone. Here's a guy that's red hot, and he's ready to step up against Roman Reigns. Make it believable. I can't believe that Shinsuke could do anything against Roman Reigns. I mean, Roman beat Brock. He's been the champion for over 600 days, and I'm supposed to believe that guy. Now, here's the thing. If New Japan Pro Wrestling Shinsuke Nakamura stepped up, I'd say, okay, now here we go. You sit up a little straighter in your chair, and you're like, okay, here we go, something special, right? But that's not who Shinsuke is.
And the same thing, I guess, goes with, and now he's the NXT champ again, but Braun Breaker. Like, I'm supposed to take this guy now as a credible threat on the main roster whenever he comes to Raw, whenever he comes to SmackDown, after he lost twice to Dolph Ziggler, who I really like, and I think should have been treated better in the WWE. He was unfortunate with some of the timing of the injuries that he had because he is a past champion. But Dolph hasn't been a legitimate threat for anyone on the main event level in such a long time. So for him to go down to NXT, beat Braun Breaker twice, they're going to have to wait for a while before Braun Breaker, comes up to the roster and, to me, becomes a credible threat for anything.
Well, even to your point, Jay Hood, like, even if it was NXT Nakamura, you look at it a little bit differently. But they've cut his legs out completely since he got called up, which we see so often. And it's also hard not to think about the fact that if not for the injury, there's no way he's in this situation. He's still in that comedy act right now. So, that takes away from it also.
Guys, let me tell you the biggest lie ever told in the sports entertainment realm of professional wrestling. The biggest lie has ever been told is wins and losses don't matter. Now, maybe in the back, wins and losses don't matter. It's like, oh, I lost, or yeah, I won. But it does matter based on the perception that we have as wrestling fans on who's next, who the next champion is, who the next challenger is. That does matter. So when I hear like Road Dogg Jesse James or some of these other guys that were agents, and they get on Twitter and say, oh, no, these wins and losses don't matter. Well, they matter as far as us believing whether or not someone can be a champion or not, because everything's about suspending disbelief. So at this point, I can't believe that Knock can win the championship because he's been so up and down in his career.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. And that's why AEW is trying to, fix that and do the win-losses. I think they still have some flaws, which we sort of talked about last week, where, a Jay Lethal will show up and he's 20-1. It's like, hey, we've seen him wrestle 2 matches. I don't understand what's going on there. But yeah, the 50-50, hey, you're going to win this week, and then he's going to win next week, and everyone's going to get a win. Yeah, that hurts storytelling.
So are we worried that Cody's going to get that, he's going to lose and he's going to drop it right back to Seth? He gets the big WrestleMania moment. He comes out. Now Seth, comes out because Cody said rematch. So Seth comes out. It's going to be a good match, but is Seth going to get that win back? And is that going to stunt momentum for Cody Rhodes?
The answer is eventually. Yes, I think that does happen. I think eventually, right? You know how it works. Is the company that's known for 50-50 booking. Hey, you beat me, I beat you. You beat me, I beat you. I beat you, I beat me. You beat me, we beat each other. I mean, that's the WWE,
and
right?
They coexist. Don't forget that part. That's a key component as well, the storyline.
Oh, at some point they'll have to tag together,
yeah.
And yes, can they coexist for this one night and be able to win that match? But again, to the point of those wins have to matter, because that's like, I mean, you have one legitimate star, in Roman Reigns in your men's division, because of a lot of that has to do with your 50-50 booking. Because
losses don't matter and titles don't matter. I mean, was it Ricochet this week said like, oh yeah, the IC title needs to be on every pay-per-view moving forward. It's like, good luck with that. Like, there's not a chance. You just got left off Mania. You're not getting that all of a sudden.
I saw that. And to put a bow on it, I heard AJ Styles in a couple of interviews saying how disappointed he was in that matchup against Nakamura. So if we're disappointed, he was aware also that match just didn't work for him, and they They just didn't gel in that match.
Yeah, which was unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead. Let's get to our number 2 on the 3 count.
All right, guys. AEW this past week saw the Blackpool Combat Club add Wheeler Yuta. That led to WWE Hall of Famer Mark Henry declaring this on SiriusXM's Busted Open.
Telling you, Bully, like the BCC is going to be the new NWO.
Wow, that's a hot take. Really?
Write it down. Take a picture. Fax it. Smoke signals. Whatever the hell you want to do with it. The BCC is going to be the new big thing in wrestling. Every guy could be the main event every week. That's what the BCC could be.
All right, guys. So agree or disagree with the potential of the BCC?
I mean, I think the BCC has tons of potential. I am a huge, I think if you couldn't tell with the way I was, talking about Jon Moxley earlier, I am a huge Jon Moxley stan. All right. I am a BCC mark. I am loving everything they are doing. I really enjoy the way this has all come together, the story they've told with Wheeler Yuta. But this seems absolutely insane to me. Like, I can't actually, this is just Mark Henry, AEW employee, trying to make something seem probably cooler than it is. Like, I certainly see some potential here, but NWO potential? Like, he's talking early NWO, not like later NWO where everybody's in NWO and you've got red and black and Hollywood and whatever, right? Like, he's talking early NWO, like the cool part.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see it.
I heard Mark say that, my friend Mark Henry. I saw him say that, and I said, boy, he's been hitting the head a lot. That's his line, not mine. But I just, I just think that's taking it a step too far, because we got to remember how the NWO came together. We all know the story of Scott Hall coming down, then here comes Kevin Nash, and then they had to convince Hulk Hogan to be part of the NWO. And so they were outsiders coming in. And so that's why that story made sense. As far as the NWO getting on a heater, I mean, we saw how that worked. With this particular faction, it feels more like the Hart Foundation of Pillman, Brett, Owen, Neidhart, and Davey Boy Smith in the WWF. I like that. It feels more like that because they're a serious group. It feels like the Shield in some ways, guys. Because
I can see that.
Because the Shield was a serious group. No matter what you thought of the group as far as the top factions you've ever seen, the Shield has to be on that team photo because they came across serious. There's a young Moxley. It's Seth Rollins. It's Roman Reigns. He was the guy that was the big guy in that group. And so it feels like that. There's a main event mafia feel where, because you got veterans. In TNA, they had Nash, Angle, Booker T, Scott Steiner, Sting, and Samoa Joe all in the same faction. That's pretty strong because those are all veterans of Hall of Famers. And so I think with this group, because it's so new and so young, is there going to be a fourth or fifth member? I don't know. But Wheeler Yuta proved that he belongs based on what we saw on Rampage of him, bleeding 10 pints of blood in that matchup.
And then putting BCC on his chest in that blood.
Yeah, I mean, that was awesome, right? And
yeah.
So we already know that the other two with Moxley and Danielson are really solid. Let's see more. I think it's too early to call them one of the best factions of all time in the NWO. Maybe they're on their way, but at this point, I don't see that.
Look at Jay Hood being the one giving the Impact love this week. The thing with them that,
well, this is the Impact pregame show?
It is the Impact pregame show. So,
okay. We gave the mention. We're good. So the big difference, like you mentioned the young aspect. Like when I think NWO, obviously where they stand is going to be where they stand, the greatest of all time. But they were on the older end. They were names. They were established names. When it comes to this faction, like I want to see more of what we saw with Wheeler Yuta. I want to see more young guys like that trying to earn their way in, but not everyone gets in. They have banger of matches with Mox or Brian or whoever, and some of the guys don't earn the respect, but then some of them do, because the way the crowd was eating up Wheeler Yuta, like he was just a guy the last few months with the Best Friends. He had some great matches, but he was just a guy, and the last few weeks turned him into a star. And if we can see more of that and more young stars sort of get that rub, then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more, we look at it differently in terms of history. I think Shield is a perfect comparison because we can look back and be like, wow, all these guys, future world champions, they started with the BCC, and I think that has the potential to do that right now.
Yeah, I think they eventually add more. I love that idea, Brian. Like, I think that's a really good, where some people get it and other people's don't. And I'm trying to think back. I know Daniel Garcia was on like the initial pitch list when Bryan Danielson was trying to have this thing come together. He's listing off some of the young stars in the back that maybe need direction. Well, Garcia's got something else to do now. He's in the Jericho Appreciation Society. So that's probably not going to be necessarily next on their list. So I'm curious. And then, you're kind of curious who is going to step up. And then you're curious with, are they going to get to a point where they start putting belts on these guys? Where they start, where they get an opportunity for the tag team titles? Do they get an opportunity for a TNT? Does Mox or Bryan Danielson get another opportunity at the AEW World Championship? So they've got, to me, a long way to go in the story they're telling here. I think the BCC is going to be around for a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a flash in the pan type thing. These guys are going to have a great long-term story, and I think it has potential. And I'm also one of those people, like, even when I'm doing, when we're doing our normal shows, when we're talking about, baseball or basketball or football, and we got the NFL draft coming up, and you just see these comparisons like, oh, here's a young Anquan Bolden. Like, can we just let this guy kind of do his thing first before we start throwing these tags on him? Let's let the BCC grow into organically whatever it's going to be and not throw the pressure of NWO onto this thing.
I think it is premature. I'm not sure who the next person is for this particular faction. I know who it won't be. Marina Shafir. It won't be her. I think that's pretty clear that she won't be part of this faction. But I just think that with William Regal, with Lord Regal part of this, guys, I mean, I think that he's a cherry on the sundae. Just the way, it's a subtle thing. But after the matchup with Wheeler Yuta, he's looking at Yuta and he turns his head like a dog would turn his head. He's like looking up and just like backpedaling. It's just the little subtle things that Regal does that bring something to the table. It's different than any manager or different than what Heyman would do. Just a subtle head turn like, oh my God, I didn't know that was in you, right? Just watch Regal very closely. And by the way, Regal, the best color man in AEW as well.
Yeah. I was about to say, anytime he's on commentary, it's fantastic. Like it's tremendous when he's on commentary during the BCC matches.
And also go check out AEW's Twitter. Post Dynamite last night, he was cursed and uncursed by Danhausen. And like the way he got into that, like that just shows just sort of his range. And I think another name out there, Lee Moriarty, I think maybe could be one of those young guys. And, in terms of AEW, big world title match Friday, Battle of the Belt Saturday. So sort of a part two, I guess, to this question. Do we see any title changes this week? We have a world title match Friday. We have a Ring of Honor title match on Saturday. What else we got? The women's title is on the line. The TNT title is on the line. A lot of big matches the next few days.
Yeah, between the tag team titles being on the line, the ROH TV title being on the line on Wednesday, there's a lot of championships that are up for grabs right now in AEW. I'm gonna say I don't think we see any title changes. Like I don't think it's the time to take it off a Hangman. I don't know how I feel about this rematch with Adam Cole. I enjoyed the last promo that I got out of Hangman.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, last week you said it was probably the best promo he's given, and I agree with that. I don't know if I'm into that match necessarily. I'm definitely not. I hate that the first challenger for the women's match is going to be Nyla Rose. Like I feel like she's had so many opportunities. I'd like to see somebody else step up to Thunder Rosa for that. I don't think they're just going to give the TNT back to Sammy Guevara. I think they're trying to build something there with the American Top Team and the record that Scorpio Sky has, where he hasn't lost in over a year. So I just don't see any of those, main AEW championships exchanging hands over the next couple of days. I think we could have some great matches, but ultimately I don't think we see anything change hands.
Nyla Rose and Thunder Rosa is going to be a banger, though. That's going to be a really good match. Because Nyla is one of the originals, right? And so she deserves the opportunity. I think it's like anything else. Nyla is going to give Thunder Rosa a really good match. And so I'm looking forward to that. I just think that there's some confusion in the marketplace right now for AEW. There's a lot of confusion, right? We're watching a lot of ROH, and I can't wait to see what this announcement is going to be this upcoming Wednesday from Tony Khan. It better be a streaming service for ROH. Because you're confusing the marketplace here, right? So I'm as a fan, I sit down. All right, AEW from New Orleans. All right, let's check it out. And it's a good show. But then here comes there's Jay Lethal and there's Sanjay Dutt and there's Samoa Joe and I'm just watching it. I'm like, if I'm just a staunch AEW fan, I don't understand this ROH stuff, right? They need to give some clarity here on what's important. Is AEW important, or does everything Tony Khan have? Is that more important? It just, you can't confuse it, Brian. I've seen it too often in wrestling, where you start confusing the marketplace. Like, we got a bunch of matches, all right? Well, where's your story? Tell me your story. That, like, to me, I don't know about you, Brian and Gabe. I kind of think that Rampage will be better than the Battle of the Belts on Saturday.
Yeah,
look at both cards.
Yeah.
I actually think so.
Yeah.
Get the world title on Friday.
Well, that's
the world title and the BCC on Friday.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about the world title and how great last week was, but this week we just got a video package. Like, why did we not see Hangman or Cole this week? Like, why are we not pushing the world title more? And I know we've talked about they want to make Rampage a bigger deal and sort of be its thing, but I worry about that. And we talk about wins, losses. I worry about Cole losing again and what that means for him. Like, where does he go from there if he loses yet another world title match on Friday?
Just remember, Gabe, we're smart now. All three of us and the people that are watching and listening are smart now. Is Adam Cole going to win the championship on a Friday on a Friday night? And not on pay-per-view?
It's a special start time, though.
We do have a special start time. I wasn't factoring that into my math. Special start time. I'm going to change my mind. Yes, they're going to flip the title on Friday night in the Texas Death Match. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot that.
Hold on, it's 7:65. Yeah, so Adam Cole's going to win the championship at 4:50 in the afternoon in California. Awesome. Live.
I mean, we got to be getting pretty close to Kenny Omega coming back, right? Like, that's got to be the next step. You kind of get the Bucks and Bucks, Red Dragon, get that whole thing back into the fold, and eventually have that Adam Cole, Kenny Omega showdown. That would be my guess, is in terms of what next for Adam Cole. But
yeah,
I guess
Adam confusion. I get it.
Yes. Too many. Yeah, that's the other thing. Too many Adams. And I've noticed, by the way, AEW has dropped the Adam from Hangman Page for this feud, at least, because way too many Adams going on right now in AEW.
Vince would have changed the name. Well, Vince definitely would have changed both of their names. I'm surprised that Adam Cole and Michael Cole were actually on the same roster. I'm surprised. Maybe that's why Adam Cole didn't get into the main roster. Maybe that's why, because we already had Michael, right?
You already had Michael. You can't have more than one.
Right.
All right, guys, let's get to number one. We talked about Dynamite last night, another top-notch card that ended with the debut of Satnam Singh. The debut was met with a subpar reaction. How did it impact the whole night for you yesterday?
I left confused. I thought it was a pretty good show. The matches were, a lot of fun. I think you had a great tag team championship match. Anytime you put the Bucks and FTR in the same ring, that's going to be a lot of fun. And Samoa Joe, and they delivered in the main event. Like, it was a fun match. They delivered in that main event. And then they just decided to walk all over it. And man, you put out the lights for that long, and then you put them back up, and everyone's going, "Who are you? Excuse me? 1 second. Who are you?" And the only thing he can do is the brain crusher thing. Like, what do we do? It doesn't give me hope. He didn't look like he could move all that well. Singh did. So I don't know if we're just looking at another Great Khali situation, another Omos situation that they've got going on in WWE, a big guy who looks intimidating. But at the end of the day, especially in AEW, where the work rate is higher, you've got this brand of match that you put on. If he can't compete to that level, I really don't know what we're doing.
Well, anytime you see something like the end of that main event on Dynamite, you always follow the money, and that's exactly what it was. AEW has a brand new deal in India, and so what Tony Khan was doing was winking at the people of India, saying, "Hey, thanks so much for brokering this deal. Now we have a brand new audience on a bigger platform in India, so we're going to bring out Singh." And that just went over like a fart in church. Because when you turn the lights off, we'll go back to ECW with this, right? Yep. When you turn the lights off and you turn it back on, you want to see something special. It could be someone from New Japan. It could be somebody that's a former WWE guy, but it can't be him when you turn the lights off. Because you turn the lights back on and everybody in New Orleans were like, "What? I'm not sure who this is." And then on top of that, just the idea that the Ring of Honor TV Championship was the main event on AEW Dynamite. I have a problem with that. Maybe you two don't. I do have a problem with it, but I understand why it happened. As far as the match with Suzuki and Joe, something along the lines of 75 chops between the two, that's an acquired taste at the beginning. 75 chops. That's an acquired taste, right? That was a New Japan style.
That's a strong style, yeah.
Yeah, it was a Suzuki match. It wasn't a Joe match. It was a Suzuki match. Now, again, that's not for everybody, but I watched it and I was like, okay, at some point they're going to have to stop chopping each other and do some kind of wrestling. I didn't expect for Suzuki to have the championship taken off him so quickly. He just won it at the Ring of Honor show in Dallas, and now Joe's the champion. Okay, great. But here's one thing I just want to point out real quickly. Guys, besides Paul White, name me the guy that's over 7 foot that's been over in wrestling. Since Paul White.
I mean, Shaq was pretty over. Like, people were pretty excited when he took that bump, when he fell backwards after Cody jumped into him, took that bump off the table. People got excited about that. That being said, Shaq's not a wrestler.
The other one I'll throw out, and it might only be for the intro, Big Cass. You can't teach that. That was a big deal, but then they split him up, and, they ruined that.
Is he legit 7 foot? My point is,
probably
not. That these guys that they bring over, and this is like Great Khali and Giant Gonzalez back in the day, Elegante and WCW, those guys just don't get over, man. Yeah. Paul White was over, but he was ruined by the WWE because they didn't make him special. He was rolling out there every week, and he had, and as Gabe said, like 35 different heel and babyface switches. So they didn't make a Giant special, even though he was able to get over the best he could with WWE booking. But a guy that size, if he can't move and he doesn't have any wrestling ability, then it's a waste. I know why he's out there is because of the indie TV deal. But my God, man, like, if you don't believe what I'm saying, watch Omos in WWE. He sucks.
Yep.
He can't wrestle. I mean, just as simple as that. It's not his fault. It's just that he can't get it done. Like, Bobby Lashley carried him in that matchup at WrestleMania. AJ Styles could not do anything with him, and that was his tag team partner, either as a tag team or when they took on each other. So guys that size, if they can't move, they don't deserve a spot in the ring. It's just a spectacle, but you can see a 7 footer in the NBA game. I don't need to see them in my wrestling if they can't do anything. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, I think it's completely fair. I agree with you guys also about the lights. Like, I think if it wasn't a lights out debut, I think we take it a little bit differently. If it's Jay Lethal on the ramp saying, "Hey, I got a surprise for you. Here's your present," and he just points and then sings behind him, we do it that way. But I'll ask you this, guys. Like, if we don't see Singh on AEW anymore and he becomes something that is just Ring of Honor, does that change at all? Like, this is a way to get him a rub and you get people excited a little bit, which I don't think it did. But now he just becomes a Ring of Honor guy. Does that make it any better? Assuming they have a TV deal.
Probably not for me. Even though you debuted it after the ROH title just changed hands, then wait to debut him on your ROH show. Like, if you have one. Again, who knows what the big announcement is going to be next week for Tony Khan. I think it's safe to assume it's going to be ROH related, but again, who knows? But you're right. If he would have been introduced the right way, he would have had to me a better chance. Like, right now, they're going to have to dig themselves out of a Satnam Singh-sized hole, because that's how deep. When you turn off the lights and then he debuts, everyone's going, And by the way, this isn't the first time that AEW did this. I was at the first AEW show in Chicago, non-pay-per-view, their first Rampage. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and the lights go out, and they come back up, and it's the Butcher and the Blade with the Bunny, and the Bunny had already debuted as somebody else in AEW. So you're going, wait, I think that's her. Who are these other two guys? I'm not 100% sure. Is that who I think it is? Like, you didn't really know. And it was kind of met with out of the crowd, like, what? It was supposed to be this big thing, and it just kind of fell. And I feel that really hurts Butcher and the Blade to this day in AEW, where it's really been hard to get them over. And I think it's going to be the same thing with Singh. It's going to be hard to get him over after you have a debut like that.
Well, to get the other side. Remember, it also happened with Dark Order. Like, remember when Uno and then when they made their debut, it's the same thing. It was like, who? And they were able to turn it around, and Dark Order is completely over now. So maybe there is hope. But yeah, I agree. Like, you'd think they would have learned from it. Like, that's 2 misses where it's like, hey, we got someone. And everyone's like, no, you don't. Like, who are these guys? Like, thanks, so.
I mean,
I don't know you don't learn from it.
For a hot crowd in New Orleans, by the way, and give them
credit.
credit.
It was such a good crowd.
Yeah. It was a hot crowd. I mean, you got the Pelicans playing down the street, but yet you got a nice crowd in New Orleans that was red hot. You took the air out of the crowd by having that afterbirth after the main event with Suzuki and Joe, and it's kind of like, and the crowd was just like confused, like, who is this guy in the suit? Do I know him? Why should I care, right? And so that's the thing. I understand why it happened. There's a reason why it happened. It could have happened, but of course, the kiss of death is the cheek squeeze.
Yeah.
When you get a big guy that gives you the cheek squeeze, it's all over, guys. It's all over. It's over before he started. If that's his move, is to squeeze your cheeks together, like, and it was cute with Samoa Joe because he got chubby cheeks. When you can do this, when you do the cheek squeeze like this, and if that's your finish, that's the shits. It just is. It's bad.
Yeah. Again, if he could do something else, they would have had him do something else. Like, that's the way I look at it. If he could have done something else, he'd have done something else other than just try to squeeze the head. By the way, because again, you mentioned New Orleans. Shout out to, Ricky Starks ends up getting the win in his hometown, which AEW does a lot of, people winning their hometown. Yeah. But shout out to Swerve Strickland for doing a moonsault off of the chest of the Limitless One. Like, unbelievable. Yes. Just goes up there like I see Keith Lee lining up and he's doing this. I'm like, what the hell is he? Oh, all right. Yeah, I'm behind that.
Yeah, man.
Like, you just
that's
kill
a star.
all that momentum. You just killed all that momentum that you had with a really good Rampage with a really good Dynamite heading into Rampage. And because now all we're talking about is the hell was that to end the show?
Like, there were so many good matches last night. We had Punk and Penta just because. Like, that was a damn good match. The 6-man was really good. Like, from start to finish, that was a really good card. But yes, like, the last thing you see is what you're going to remember. And the last thing we saw was a bunch of like, wait, who's this guy? And the announcers, I know they try, but like, I feel like it's WWE like when they insult our intelligence. Like, oh, of course, it's the NBA's first ever Indian drafted player. Like, don't you know who that is? Like, no, we don't. Like, they didn't work like that.
By the way, I believed JR when JR's like, who's that?
Yeah.
No, of course. Yeah.
Actually, JR had no idea.
No, JR didn't know. JR doesn't. I know Jim. Jim doesn't want information. He doesn't want, like, he'll have some notes, but as far as like segment to segment, even in WWE, he didn't want to know. He wanted to be excited. But what was so funny is Mr. Information, Mr. Prepared in Excalibur even didn't know who he was. And Tony's like, oh, yeah, I've seen him in Atlanta working out. I know this guy. He's Sing. It's like, I'm like, wait a minute. How does Tony know, but Excalibur doesn't know? Like, that's really strange. That was a twist that you don't see on AEW Dynamite usually.
Yeah, that's it. I don't like when they insult our intelligence. Like, I think that's part of the reason WWE is where it is in terms of wrestling fans, because they insult our intelligence all the time. And that's what that is. Like, I'd rather them just be confused the whole time. I know they've run into it before, like when Alistair debuted. No one knew what to call him. Like, oh, it's Malachi, or it's Alistair, or it's, hey, we know this guy. Like, you run into that also, but like, I don't know. I don't like the insulting of intelligence.
But you guys are right, though. You're right, guys. It really was a good Dynamite up to that last point because it just confused everybody. But just shout out to New Orleans. You had a choice. You can go to the Pelicans game at Smoothie King or go to the UNL Lakefront Arena in New Orleans to see it. And it was a hot crowd. I mean, it was about 4,000 people or maybe a little less. But just the point is that they were loud and into it. You love that because when you're watching at home, you're like, boy, this event I'd love to be at. So it's pretty cool.
All right. It feels like we've done a lot of negative talk after we got past our 4 pillars of wrestling. Weren't exactly excited about a lot. Felt like our brains, yes, like Jay Hood, were being crushed in. But Jay Hood, you're excited for the show you're going to this weekend, right? New Japan Pro Wrestling, first show in Chicago. They have their events, the Windy City Riot. You're going to that. Are you excited to go to the Windy City Riot on Saturday night?
I am at the Odeum in suburban Chicago in Villa Park, Illinois. I'm looking forward to it because it's my first New Japan show that I've ever been to live. There's a lot of 6-man matches there or 8-man tag team matches. They have a lot of talent there.
They've got a 12-man match. They got a 12-man match featuring the Bullet Club.
Yeah, everyone's getting a check, brother. Just put as many people out there as possible. But it'll be my opportunity to see Jon Moxley. And by the way, for a twist, how about this? Jon Moxley's not at Battle at the Belts, but he's going to be at New Japan. And remember, New Japan and this show and the AEW show is going to be running around the same time. I think that's fascinating. That Jon Moxley's not available for Battle of the Belts, but he's going to be there at New Japan. So that's cool. But I'm looking forward to it because it's the first time that I've seen this. Last time I was in that building, Impact, they ran that building for Bound for Glory or whatever. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I mean, you got Mox and Ospreay. Like, what else can you ask for?
Yeah, that's. I'm disappointed. I was initially slated to go to that show, and I will not be there. But I am very disappointed because Jon Moxley versus Ospreay to me would be the match I'd be looking forward to the most. I'm guessing I'd walk out of there maybe not saying that was my favorite match of the night because it is a loaded card, and I think you're going to get a ton of action.
Juice Robinson said today with Brian Alvarez that he's going to be on this show also, that he is not wrestling for New Japan after the show on Saturday. And he says that he's not even really interested in wrestling anymore. I don't know what that means, but he says that after this, his contract's done with New Japan. That's just a little news. I know we're not used to doing news on GKW, but that's a little kernel, a little tidbit about Juice Robinson.
Yeah, he is in a 6-man tag team Chicago street fight. Going to be a big time match for him. So no rules. I'm assuming that's what that means. Anytime you just insert name of city here, street fights, just means there's no rules. But it should be a great show.
We do have some questions. One question is from Vikram says that, is this a rerun of WWE in 2017 with the Bollywood Boys and Jinder?
It's not going to be as good because Jinder can move. Like at the end of the day, like Jinder isn't, he's not like top caliber professional wrestler, but Jinder, he can put on a good match. Like he can move around, and yeah, I can understand what the WWE was trying to pull off there. Like Jinder's world title.
Like Jinder was world title because of relationship. Like I don't.
Oh yeah, sure, but again, like he could move. Like
yes.
I'm not putting a very high bar out there of can you move? And if he can't, like, I'm not going to be interested. So at least like, okay, I can kind of pay attention to this. It's not going to be terrible. Whereas like from what I saw from Singh last night, unless he suddenly can move better or had something wrong with him on Wednesday night, I'm not expecting much out of him going forward.
I'm always amazed when I see big guys like that can't move. Like, how did you make it to the NBA? Like, you just sat in the post forever? Like, I'm not saying I ever watched any of his basketball, but like, how did that work?
Because, I mean,
I don't understand.
So, one of my favorite things that I've ever, like, one of my favorite things is we've done, through ESPN Milwaukee, we've done free throw contests on the floor at the old Bradley Center now at Fiserv Forum here in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. And it's, it's early in the morning before a Bucks game, and we have like 100 people come in and shoot free throws, and you're standing on that court, and you're looking around going, man, this thing is huge. And then you go to the game that night and you see the players line up at the free throw line for the national anthem. You're going, man, that court is tiny. Like when you're that big and now you're in a wrestling ring, like that's a tiny space to operate in when you used to have 94 feet. So it's a different type of athleticism when we're talking about, bigger speed, straight line speed, getting up and down a floor versus the agility needed inside the squared circle. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, he's going to suck. The next question, one other question. No! Stop pushing my face. Shakeinator 722, this last question says, do you think the merger between Warner Media and Discovery Inc. will have significance to AEW or not? Talking about significance to AEW. Okay, so I'm going to say this, not as a hot take, but as a mild take. Guys, I'm very concerned about this. If this happened with WCW when they were the hot organization and they were the AEW of its time. And then when the ownership switched, they couldn't be as blue. They couldn't be as coarse with their language. Things started to change, right? And so they could not be as, what was it, like not rated R, but like PG-13 or
TV
whatever.
14.
TV 14. Yeah. They couldn't be that. And so let's see if you could still swear in AEW after this merger is complete. Because that's one of the things that appeals to, I think, to all of us is the edge of AEW, where you can kind of speak your mind. You could swear, you can feel, you kind of just speak off the top of your head. let's see if the edge is taken away with this new company that's taken over Warner Media. We'll see. It's going to be Discovery owned now. So we'll see if that changes. If it changes, it doesn't change the action in the ring. But as far as the language, it probably will. You agree?
But I think Tony cares too much. I mean, we talked a lot about Mox and Yuta. Like, that match doesn't work as well with no blood. Like, the blood added to that. And if they're going PG, which we don't know if they are, we don't think they are, I don't think they are, you're not bleeding like that. Like, Wheeler Yuta cannot bleed like that on a PG show. And I think Tony, who cares about storylines, who cares about pro wrestling, I think he cares enough to protect that, to make sure they still have the ability to do things like that.
And as long as they're making money, you hope that they just leave it alone, right? Like, as long as AEW is making money for TBS on Wednesday nights and TNT on Friday nights, like, hopefully they care and just let that be. You know, just, okay, you guys are making us money. If you haven't crossed, we'll keep it TV 14. You guys have been doing well. We'll continue to let you build your thing. But you're right. There's always that unknown when there's going to be a change in management potentially that they're facing.
It's I'll give a perfect example is when I worked for Disney before we got taken over by Good Karma Broadcasting. Good Karma Broadcasting has standards, but it's not so tight like it is with but not like it is with Disney, because the mouse was totally different than Good Karma Broadcasting. I feel like I'm more free to talk to you guys about whatever, and feel like I'm not going to have the Disney mouse over my shoulder saying, "Don't say that, I'll fire you." And so that's the difference. So, but there's a difference. In Good Karma, I feel like we feel free. We could be able to speak our minds. We could do it. But Disney was a different animal altogether.
Yeah, I mean, this show exists, so clearly, yes, standards are very high. Yes, very high over at GKB. They let us to create GKW. That will do it for us this week on GKW. Can't wait to hear the review of the New Japan Wrestling show in Chicago, the Windy City Riot that Jay Hood is going to be at. We'll review it all. We'll talk about it all next week on Good Karma.